Of course, we're staying with analysis of with the 2025 appropriation bill, and with me in the studio for further analysis is a food security expert, African farmer, Mogaji. Thank you very much for joining me at this point and discussing this. Looking at the 2025 appropriation bill, the budget, what's your take on this, especially as it relates to food security?
Well, the budget shows a major increment, which speaks to where the heart of the government is. And so in the sector, we say it's a welcome development. We would have wanted it to be more, but at least we're still celebrating this double projection. So yeah, it's a welcome development, and it sends a message to the private sector that the government will be looking into agriculture. And so I'm sure the people who have been sitting on the fence, considering the body language of the government, would actually see that it's time for all of us to get on a boat.
Now, does this address funding gaps in the agricultural sectors, particularly for smallholder farmers?
Well, because we have an increased budget does not necessarily mean that it bridges the funding gap until we see the details of the budget. So this might be, a chunk might be infrastructure, which does not put liquid cash in the hands of players. Okay, so we don't know if it's funding processing. So until we see the details, but really, government is not supposed to be the one really putting the funding in the hands of the players, the smallholder farmers, the SMEs. So let's just talk about SMEs and not the smallholder farmers, because the smallholder farmers are important, but they may not necessarily get us to the promised land without the SMEs within the value chain. So it's basically private sector that should fund agriculture, while or the agribusiness value chain, which is end-to-end, before production till after consumption. So it should be private sector to do that, but basic infrastructure policies is where we need government. With this direction, if government stays with the business of government, which is infrastructure and ensuring that the system works, if the system works, then the private sector will find it easy to put money in and plan long term. But it's the private sector that must fund the farmers and the people in the operators, not government.
All right, so the budget now, does it address food inflation?
Well, the budget doesn't. The budget is, we're just excited about the increment in the budget. Even the increment, I know there's a Maputo declaration some years back, over almost 2 decades now, going to like 2 decades now, where the African countries agree that 10% of their budget should go into agriculture. So a few countries that have adopted that 10%, the agriculture is way not in the same place with Nigeria. So until we begin to see 5% of the budget, 10% of the budget, that is when we will begin to have that hope. But right now, it's still encouraging, at least for the private sector. And it is the private sector that will drive this sector sustainably. Interventions, interjections from government will help, but sustainability long-term is still private sector.
All right, but is the government, in your own view, is the government just paying lip service to improving agriculture, or they're actually doing the job of improving agriculture?
Well, with this budget, it shows that government is putting the money where the mouth is. Back end, I've been privileged to engage at the highest level of operators in the agri sector from government. I see a sincerity of heart to get things done. Many people have engaged, particularly with the Federal Minister of Agriculture, a few times, and he listens, and not just listening, he acts. So, and we've seen a few of the directors in the ministry also having the same language and body language. So I'm hoping that this will be sustained. I'm hoping if this is sustained, then we would see a transformation. But beyond that, I would like to see a major transformation in the parastatals under government. A key aspect that the president and the presidency, as regards Nigeria's food security, that they must pay attention to is giving us ambassadors. Many people will say, what has ambassadors got to do with food security? Ambassadors are the ones that will promote investments. Ambassadors are the ones that will promote this 100% leap in funding. They are the ones that would attract. Now, the government needs to give ambassadors targets. The quarterly, you have to bring in 5 investors into Nigeria or 5 people who will collaborate with Nigerians. So those ambassadors are very key for Nigeria's food security because of where we are today. But generally, I'm seeing a move in the right direction. The new, like the river basins, when you look at the budgets vis-a-vis the river basins, where I've played over 2 decades, the new management that I just saw yesterday, I saw some very key people in the river basins that shows seriousness. Now, it's a different thing to be appointed. It's another thing for them to run the vision of Mr. President. Right now, I believe so strongly that Mr. President is still getting it right. Whether people will deliver on the mandate given to them, it's another ball game. But right now, I can't say to you from being a patriotic person in the sector, I'm seeing moves in the right direction.
Okay, so you talked about monitoring. What can experts like you do to ensure that there's effective monitoring such that the proposal for food security for agriculture is implemented to the latter?
So what government needs to do is to engage us, either as observers, to give us details. It's very crucial for us to have details so that when we have details, we can also advise. And I'm not saying give us an appointment. I'm saying let us know the details. Government may mean well, but the implementation may not, flow the way intended. So if there's an engagement where they put, I use the word patriotic, not just players, patriotic players in the sector to look at it. Years back when, take case in view, when they were building, funding rice, it was a good intention, but the how was not the right way. So yes, we have a budget right now where they need to get players involved so we can advise such that they can tweak how they want to implement. That is very, very crucial. And they need to get players on board in that monitoring and evaluation. I will say this. In the last 3 decades in this country, what I have seen is the president will have good intention, the presidency would have good intention, the governors would have good intentions, but the people who will implement will do otherwise. So, and that
African farmer seem to be having some network issues there, trying to hear you or get a visual from you. Can you hear us at this time?
If we're giving, you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Go on.
Okay, so over the years, what I've seen is that the president means well, the governors means well, but the implementation, that is where everything goes wrong. And so if we're able to take care of that now, it will go a long way. And how to do that is to get MSMEs involved, and which is, if government wants to fund like corn or tomatoes or peppers, let the government attach SMEs as beneficiaries. So if you are funding smallholder farmers, which we always do, attach the smallholder farmers to processors, to middlemen who are SMEs registered. So government can track, without that connection now, we will repeat cycles. And I hope this administration does not repeat errors of the past, because we are at a tipping point, and so all the efforts need to show now.
All right. It's always said that when insecurity thrives, food security will not be certain. What more can we do to address insecurity such that farmers can now go back to the farms and we can now have food security in the nation?
Well, what we generally don't talk about is the fact that insecurity has reduced phenomenally. Okay, we're not amplifying that. What is really affecting farmers across the country is the fear of insecurity. If you check my track record on any media, I've always said that government has always underutilized the power of media. The voice of the insurgents is louder than the voice of government. We need the voice of government to be louder now, to showcase insecurity is huge, but not everywhere. So we need to amplify where we don't have insecurity. We need to give hope now. Many people are still stuck with the old bad news. What we need to do is to be deliberate in running campaigns to showcase where there's no insecurity. And I say this, another crucial way that government can get people to know that manage insecurity or let them know how to avert it is that we need to engage the radio stations and the television stations more, such that people have the phone numbers. They can call in. So if there's any issue in this one local government, ensure that there are phone numbers of the next villagers. We need to collaborate now. As long as we're able to amplify this, leveraging radio or media on the spot, we'll be able to tackle it. What normally happens is that, a village goes ravaged, and 2-3 hours, nobody knows. But with a phone call to the media houses around, it can be escalated and amplified. This we need to bring on the table now, getting local governments connected with each other in terms of security-wise, in terms of communication, and pay heavy attention to media. Media can help us with insecurity more than we've engaged them over time.
All right, it seems that we're moving towards technology. From what you have said, that's an issue in rural areas where connectivity is a problem. How do we bridge that gap? African farmer, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
All right, let's talk about technology and connectivity in rural areas. Now, how do we bridge that gap if we're talking about curbing insecurity in those areas so farmers can boldly go to their farms and plant some seeds and cultivate some crops? How do we address all of these issues?
Well, it's an infrastructural issue, but I would say that it's not as bad as it looks. Most of the young guys in the villages, all of them are online. Many of them are more on Facebook. Okay, so, and many of them are on WhatsApp. So it's not a major issue in terms of connectivity. The issue is we have not leveraged, technology more with rural people. We have leveraged it more with urban youths, forgetting that the rural youths have platforms that they go on. So it's us leveraging it. It's not that it's not available. They watch YouTubes. They learn a lot of things. So basically is for policymakers, for implementers, when we're designing programs and projects, we should design it with the rural in mind. We'll say, go to this website. The rural people don't go to the website. But you say, go to Facebook, go to YouTube. That's a platform they understand. And so we need to also come to the level of the rural community. In terms of seeds, technology has moved. Many of the rural communities, especially youths now in the rural communities, know a lot as much as the urban. It is access to it that we don't have. So take, for instance, if we're doing any intervention now, let's say we're giving fertilizers, or it's not intervention, we want to link with investors, we should be making it a local government by local government conversation, not a state conversation. The more we cascade things down to the rural and local governments, the faster we'll be able to bridge this gap of either connectivity or access or speed in implementation.
All right, African farmer, in all of this now, you're already optimistic that the budget would improve agriculture in Nigeria, but also, are we optimistic that as individuals, as private sector, your lot will be better?
Well, let me use the word should improve agriculture in terms of food security, availability, affordability. Should. I'm optimistic. Next year will be 20 years that I changed my name to African Farmer. From projection 2025, the dynamics, the indices now is not looking good. But I tell you, with sincerity from government, which I am seeing now, and commitment from private sector and a few individuals who are patriotic, I am optimistic that by June next year 2025, where food should be astronomically high, we will be able to bring it lower. And why do I say that? Take, for instance, like Lagos State now. I've been involved in one activity or the other with Lagos State government, Ministry of Agriculture. In the last 3-4 months, there's been a lot of planning and implementation to ensuring that food does not go astronomically high. And I know Ekiti also is doing it. I know Plateau, Jos is also, Plateau is doing it. So what I'm saying is that we're seeing more government being proactive, especially the people at the helms of affairs. We're seeing more commissioners of agriculture who are more enlightened and exposed, but most importantly, that have listening ears and believe in collaboration. So I am very optimistic that June 2025, it won't be government, it will be us. And government also would find a reason to collaborate. But I'm very optimistic that we are going to create an economic miracle with or without government, because some of us are ready.
I like your optimism, African Farmer Mogaji. Thank you so much for talking to us and giving us your insights. Indeed, your optimism is quite infectious. And of course, you have put some light into all of this. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you for having me.